Hey, everybody, I'm Jorge, and welcome to Shoot the Gap, our IDP fantasy football show here on the Fantasy and Frames podcast. Tonight, we got some really awesome content for you. We are going to do a deep dive into the 2023 NFL rookie draft class with the best interior defensive linemen. So stay tuned as we break down these prospects, and we let you know whether or not they're a good fit for your IDP fantasy football leagues this season. Before we get started with tonight's show, everybody, remember, head over to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe and hit that bell so you're notified every single time we put out a piece of fantastic fantasy football content, both on offense as well as for IDP. We can't wait to get all of our subscribers, ship numbers up. Thanks to your support. For those of you who have been supporting us thus far, we really appreciate it. And if there's anything you want to see content-wise, please reach out to us. Let us know what you want. But we got a lot of things coming your way, especially before the NFL draft and then after the NFL draft and so on and so forth. So head over to our YouTube page, as well as head over to fantasyandframes.com. See all of our rankings for IDP, both in Redraft and Dynasty, as well as all of our article content, both in IDP and on offense. We cover everything here at Fantasy and Frames. For those of you who are on Twitter right now watching the show, because of the issue that StreamYard has with Twitter, we can't actually see your comments. So again, head over to our YouTube channel, drop the comments in the chat, whatever questions you have, we'll be happy to answer them. And so really excited to be joined by Austin and Hollywood this week. Austin, let's go through our Inside the Frames segment.
Yeah, so this week's question is the big news out of this week that I got was Thursday night games are now up for being able to be flexed. So how does that affect a team or even just player preparation if they do get flexed into that Thursday night game, and how does that relate to their fantasy production?
Austin, Hollywood, what are your thoughts here?
So these games have been pretty horrific right on Thursday nights for the most part. We might get one good one every now and then, and I have to imagine they want to flex in the more desirable matchups and try to keep some of the divisional games, right? I'm sure that's what they're trying to balance. So I'm okay with there being better football on Thursday nights. I am kind of concerned when it comes to those flex announcements will be made. Like, are they going to make them early in the week? Are they going to make them kind of last minute? Which I guess if you're like me and check your lineups every day, it don't really matter, I guess. And then somebody said something about playing their studs. I'm starting my studs. This is not going to affect me with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Austin, what about you? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, like Hollywood said, these games have just been awful to watch usually. Low scoring affairs, just fantasy production's usually not what you want. And now I think it completely comes down to when do they make these decisions of flexing these games? Is it going to be that Monday or Tuesday of that week? I feel like they have to make a decision before that. So
I would feel like it would be on a Tuesday, right? Monday night games are done. You're officially starting the next week.
Right. I would also that would make the most sense. But if they're doing that and you're giving a team 2 days to prepare for a team instead of they're planning on leaving on Thursday to go wherever they're going, and now we got to get on a plane right now to go. I would be worried about playing my non-studs in these games, like my flex guys, my RB2, wide receiver 2. I'd be like, okay, maybe I should look elsewhere if these decisions are being made late.
Well, I kind of think these flex changes won't happen until later in the season, right? When we start getting closer to probably week 13, 14, when you're starting to see some of the playoff scenarios play out and all that. Early in the year, I think we're still probably going to get the same kind of crappy football, I think. But because it's going to be divisional games and stuff.
If it's that week 13, 14, that's fantasy playoffs, and I don't think you can make a decision on that. Like in the fantasy playoffs, you're going to have to just sit those guys probably.
No,
which guys?
You're running back twos, wide receiver twos, flex players.
Oh,
And
okay.
not your studs.
Okay.
You're playing your studs no matter what. That's just going to be a thing. But these
Right.
non-studs, it's going to be a question mark.
I think you brought up a very good point there, Hollywood. Regardless if it's, a good team or a bad team, which first of all, this screams Al Michaels calling shots behind the scenes at Amazon and is like, hey, you're paying me this money. You're not going to put me in these BS games that are just god awful with horrible teams. Like, if I'm going to commit to this, then I'm committing to something that's going to be fun for me too. So Amazon definitely, I think, is pulling some strings, aka Al Michaels, with the NFL. Two, we have seen plenty of times where a team is balled out, a good team is balled out on Sunday, and then a couple days later put up a dud on Thursday Night Football. So whether it's a good team or if it's a bad team, like I don't think this changes one thing at all in terms of the quality of football you're going to get. You're still going to run the risk of poor play. You're still going to run the risk of now injuries, just like you would normally. The only difference is now you're going to get the players on the really good teams potentially injured easier. So that's also not good for their team. So that's kind of where we stand there with that, folks. Before we get into what you're here for, interior defensive lineman talk, let's get into a little read here from TrophySmack.
What is up, everyone? It's your boy, Fantasy J77. I'm here to tell you about the best wall plaques in the game. That's right, Wall Smack by TrophySmack. From the epic fantasy wins to the pictures of your loved one's special occasions. Use the code FRAMES10 at checkout for 10% off. It's that easy. Load your pictures on the TrophySmack.com. Pick your size. Don't forget to put FRAMES10 as your promo code at checkout. That's it. It's done. Enjoy the rest of the show, everyone.
The best ad read person in the biz. We got Fantasy J77 behind the glass. Gator J. What up, Gator? And of course, always remember,
Gator don't play no shit. You feel me? Gator never been about that. Never been about playing no shit.
No, seriously, Gator does not play any shit, folks. Anyhow, as we all know, because he's a taskmaster behind the scenes. Let's get into some interior defensive lineman talk. Let's talk some IDP. Let's tell you why we think these players that we're going to be talking to you about tonight have some potential upside for your IDP fantasy football rosters, potentially even this year or for dynasty purposes down the road. Let's start with Mr. Jalen Carter. Austin, take it away.
Yeah, before I get into Jalen Carter, I've just got to point out one thing. As you see underneath my name there, I am now the IDP fantasy icon protege to one and only Hollywood Titan. He took me under his wing last week, so I'm super excited about that.
I'm glad it's a big wing.
It is. I need it.
Yes,
Anyways, Jalen Carter, he's 6'3", 300 pounds. On the field, there's little to no complaints. But he does have that massive question mark off the field. Right. The current issue is causing him to kind of start to slide down the board for some of these NFL teams. They don't know what's going to happen to him. I guess kind of getting into it, he had a warrant out for his arrest for reckless driving way too fast. It ended up with 2 staff members passing in that crash, I believe. So not quite sure what's going to happen on the legal side of things, but currently it's not looking great in terms of his draft stock. It is slowly going down, but he is a freak athlete. No one can deny that. So this caused him to miss the NFL Combine. He was there before it started. It was like 15 minutes before it started, I think, that he got called, and he went back to Athens, Georgia to figure all this stuff out. And then on his pro day, he only took part in his position drills, so he didn't do any of the 40-yard dashes or 10-yard splits, anything like that. So, but his athleticism and talent was never a question, so I don't think that hurts him missing those events really, just in general. Today I read a couple new reports out that the Raiders are fully off of them, and as they should be, because they have a long history of players and the legal system. So, good for them to just sit this one out. And then the big news that I saw today was Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Lions, stated that he interviewed with a teammate of Carter's and gained interesting information. And then when he was asked if it was good or bad, he just reiterated that it was interesting and a good information to know about a person. But breaking down more of Carter's actual skill set on the field, Carter was the number 1 defensive player before all this went down. But I still have Will Anderson over him personally, fantasy-wise. And then, let's see, his stats this past season, he was able to put up 32 tackles, which 7 were for a loss, 3 sacks, and 25 total pressures, and he only played in 10 games.
That's unreal.
Like I mentioned last week, Georgia was not a team that got to the quarterback a lot, and he only played in those 10 games, and he was second on the team in sacks. So the scouts saw that he had impressive handwork, impressive quickness, and he did it from every position on the defensive line. It didn't matter if he was a 1-tech, a 3-tech, or a 5-tech. He was in the backfield very quickly. The biggest negative I saw about him was whenever he lined up head up on an offensive lineman. That's when he stood up too fast, got that pad level too high, and kept getting pushed back. And, that didn't happen very often because there's not very many people that was bigger and stronger than him, but that could change in the NFL. But at the end of the day, he's a top-tier interior lineman that will likely have success in the NFL as long as this legal stuff gets sorted out. He's just got to figure out that stuff first.
Awesome breakdown there, Jalen Carter. For those who are on Twitter, we see there are a few of you here. We can't see your comments or anything in the chat you may put in. So head over to our YouTube page and drop any questions or comments you have there. We'd appreciate it, as well as hit that subscribe button while you're there. Hollywood, you're not exactly in a good spot when the Raiders, who are known for taking reclamation projects, are like, you know what, we're going to take him off our draft board. That's not really a good sign, is it?
No, but are they really in play for him anyway? I mean, seriously, is that what they need? I mean, the thought process is if the best player in the draft falls, then you take him. But
right,
I kind of think they've got bigger issues than defensive tackle right now. So
that they do.
Well, they don't have Cleveland Farrell anymore. They need to address. I'm kidding.
Oh my God, what will they ever do?
Yeah, let's get into our next guy. I'm going to talk about Kobe Turner, former Richmond Spider, transferred 5th-year senior to Wake Forest, 6'3", 290 pounds. Again, pure defensive tackle. In 2022, had 21 solo tackles, 17 assists, 10 tackles for a loss, which I'll get into the relevance of that in a few, and 2 sacks. Amongst all eligible interior defensive linemen for the draft this year in the Power 5 conferences. He was 3rd overall in total pressures and was 6th overall in win rate against offensive counterparts, 14.7%. He grades very highly both in pass rushing or as a run defender, but he leans more to being a good run defender than pass rusher. While he does shut off his blockers really well, he does get to the ball quickly. That to me screams TFLs. He screams like somebody who's really good at getting you the tackles for a loss, and those fantasy points obviously add up. And like I said, 10 TFLs and 2 sacks. That's kind of telling. And it's interesting that the players that I'll be talking about today, those stat lines kind of mirror what you're kind of seeing in terms of like the scouting reports and what have you out there. He has a nonstop motor. He keeps on going. When taking on, offensive with stationary quarterbacks, he's going to play a pivotal role just because he doesn't like to apply those pressures. He doesn't really have a big frame, so to speak, compared to other interior defensive linemen, and he doesn't have actually the longest arms. So in the pros, he may have a little bit of trouble getting off of any blocks there. I did mention that he's coming from the University of Richmond in Virginia. So pedigree, 1 year at Wake Forest. What does that really mean? That's to be determined. But you can't knock the production. You can't knock the pressures. I think he's going to be somebody that if he goes to an NFL team that has a good set of end rushers, he's going to have a lot of that pressure taken off of him in terms of like the double blocks, so to speak. So getting that one-on-one blocking assignment is going to be pivotal for him. He can definitely beat that block. And like I said, he's going to probably assist more in the run game, get you those assisted tackles. You look at his solo to assist ratio, it's kind of like even. So he can run down plays. He can make the tackles on the back end against the run. I'm excited for him just because, it's not the sexiest of pick here for players. So you're probably taking him if you have like a 5-round rookie IDP draft, maybe late third, early fourth, depending. We have to see what happens at Wake's Pro Day. I have actually seen if that's happened or not, so I will get back to you on that. But he does have that motor that you want. He does have the production that you want. He sniffs out the run really well. There are a lot of positives in his game. And when we try to compare that to what that means for fantasy, again, TFLs, your balanced scoring, that can range between 2 and 3 points depending on your scoring settings. We have them as 2 points here on our fantasy and frames balanced scoring. So we've seen over the course of the past couple seasons in IDP fantasy football, the trend that interior defensive linemen are becoming valuable. Christian Wilkins, for example. Aaron Donald has been invaluable. We saw last year Quinnen Williams go off all year for fantasy purposes. For most defensive lineman eligible positions, he was near the top. And that's going against edge rushers in terms of outside linebackers and defensive ends. So plays very, very well. These interior linemen are starting to assert themselves. You can no longer ignore them in IDP as just people that, I'm just not going to start them. Jonathan Allen, who I think Hollywood a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about him and how you had, for most of the season, were considering him a defensive player of the year. So, I'm excited for his upside, for Kobe Turner's upside. There is a lot to be determined there, but in terms of a late round dynasty pick, I think given the right opportunity, he could definitely perform pretty well. Hollywood, who do you have for us?
First of all, how good is Cult of Personality, by the way? What a banger. But
the reason why CM Punk uses as his theme song.
Yes. What a great theme song. Anyway, so I took Kalijah Kancey, right? Because I felt like he's going to be one of the more interesting defensive linemen, especially if you're playing in position-specific leagues, right? So he's 6'1", 281. So he's a little undersized, right? But he wins with explosion, quickness, and leverage. That's where he excels, along with his nonstop motor. His length can be issues at times, and if he allows big offensive guard or lineman get on him, he's going to get washed out, right? His college production as a 2-year starter stands out, 27.5 TFLs, 14.5 sacks. Has a knack for finding his way into the backfield and pressuring the quarterback. He's going to lose a good share of plays, but he's going to force offensive linemen to be on point to do so. So, in other words, he's going to lose some plays, but that offensive line is going to have to work to make him lose those plays. So, he showed pretty well at the combine, 4.6, 740. I didn't expect that. I figured he'd be a little slower than that. And then the 1.64 10-yard split, I thought was all right too. I see him getting comped to Aaron Donald a lot. And I think that's just a lazy take, really. I mean, I get it. Plays the same position, went to the same college, right? But outside of that, they're not the same players. First of all, there's only one Aaron Donald. So right. I think to comp him to Donald I just think that's lazy work. So as far as Kancey himself, I think he's a really good player, right? Because he may be undersized, but he's so quick, and with him being kind of short like that, and his leverage wins, I mean, he gets on you really quick. So, I mean, he's going to cause some problems, but he's got to learn how to not let these big offensive linemen lock onto him, because that's really where he's going to lose at.
No, that's out of all three people we've talked about here so far, Kancey, Turner, Carter, where would you rank them, Hollywood? 1, 2, 3. 1 being the best.
No, it's clear. It's clearly Carter, Kancey, than Turner.
Okay.
I mean, it really doesn't matter after Carter because he's the best. He's the best one, period.
And do you think now, Cansey, do you think he translates well for IDP?
Oh man, position specific leagues he has a chance, but if you're playing in basic leagues with defensive linemen, I'm probably going to avoid him.
Now, would the same thing go for Carter?
No, I would take Carter in position specific for sure. You could take him in general leagues, but I think his value, it's naturally like all defensive tackles, that value is going to be a lot less, right? But I think if you're kind of looking at a defensive tackle to take, he would be the one to take.
And remember, folks, there are a few platforms out there that actually allow you to play in 5 position designation IDP leagues. In terms of apps, the only one that I'm currently aware of is ESPN allows you to have defensive tackle specific positions. And of course, MFL has that option also, but they do not have, well, they have an app, but it's a third-party app. It's not their app. Before we get into the next set of interior defensive linemen, let's talk to me about TrophySmack. Hey, folks. Hey, folks. It's Jorge here from Fantasy and Frames, and today I'm here to talk to you about TrophySmack's customizable championship belts. In my opinion, the word quality is something that is thrown around a little bit too freely nowadays. That is not the case when it comes to these championship belts. You can take any picture you want and using TrophySmack's online design tool, upload them onto your belt. This is truly a customizable experience that you can use to celebrate any occasion, whether it's winning a fantasy football championship, to maybe reaching a professional milestone, or maybe you just deck this thing out with all your favorite pictures and just walk around your home with some bling on your shoulder to remind you that you are awesome. You should definitely do that. And if you head over to TrophySmack.com today, use the promo code FRAMES10, you'll get 10% off of your purchase. Highly recommend. So again, head over to TrophySmack.com today and get your customizable championship belt 10% off using the promo code FRAMES10. All right, let's do things in reverse order this time. Holly, but let's go back to you. Let's talk about Carl Brooks. Tell us why we should care about Carl Brooks for our IDP fantasy football leagues.
Right, so he's going to be one of your lesser known names, right? Comes out of Bowling Green, 6'3", 303, pretty big frame. The first thing that stood out about his game is his blue-collar, workman-like approach. I mean, he brings it every game, every play. He just high motor, the whole 9 yards. He's experienced leader, 48 starts, he's experienced with 48 starts, a leader, team captain, and was super productive in college, right? 46 TFLs, 27 and I'm sorry, I lost my spot here. 27 and a half sacks, 6 PBUs, 6 forced fumbles. Big frame, but he's got the versatility and the frame to play all up and down the line, right? So he can play at end, he can play inside at tackle, whatever you need, whatever technique you need him to play, he can do, and he can play it pretty effectively. His game's going to translate well to the NFL because he's got quickness, hands, footwork, and again, especially his motor, right? It just never turns off. So he dominated the lower competition, which is the MAC. I say that's lower because that's not one of your Power 5. But he dominated the lower competition, so he's going to have to prove that he can do that against stiffer competition, right? Now you're up here with the big boys. You got to be able to prove that. And I think that's going to translate and happen. So high football IQ, he gets a lot of PBUs, right? He's aware, can get his hands up, knock passes down, and his instincts is really great with understanding how and when to use his counters. So he's kind of got shorter arms than you'd like, but that hasn't been an issue so far. And his pro day was kind of average, 509, 40, 28 reps on the bench was pretty good, but a 7.63 3-cone. So, it was a mixed bag with that. Not wow, eye-popping numbers, but, those, I don't put a whole lot of stock in a one-time combine or a one-time pro day, right? Because anybody can have an off day. Going back and looking at his tape confirms kind of everything that I saw in him. Now, again, you're jumping from the MAC to the NFL. That's a pretty good sized jump, but he seems to have all the tools to make it happen, right? So I'm just hoping he lands in a great spot. I would love to see him land somewhere like Philadelphia. That would be amazing to have him in Philadelphia with that group. I think he would just excel there. He's not going to be an early pick, but I would probably say day 2, maybe 3rd round somewhere. I think there's good value there. And then for fantasy purposes, it's going to be, we're talking defensive line, so it's going to be the position-specific leagues. If you've got deep benches and deep rosters, which I think most of us that play those leagues kind of do, he's definitely worth a roster spot.
No, that's a very good quote. That's a very good point. And let me piggyback off of that. To Austin. Austin, you mentioned last week, the fact that we look a lot when it comes to stats at the Power 5. We look at, just because the level of competition, you're basically playing against other pros at the various schools here. But when you see somebody who's as productive as Karl Brooks was, I mean, this guy was like borderline elite in pressure rate, win rate, you name it. Coming from, like you said, Bowling Green. For a fantasy manager, especially for Dynasty, how much does just, the absurd performance sway you to maybe taking this person a little bit earlier than you would have based, on the fact that they come from lesser competition?
Yeah, so for me, I was just taking a look at, teams Bowling Green played last season. And, I mean, UCLA, that's who they started off against, which is good. Great. I don't know how he did in that game personally, but outside of that, it's all these other MAC schools that are like, okay, we've seen the MAC play on they play what Thursdays usually, Wednesdays, something like that.
They play Sunday during the week. Yes, it is confirmed.
Yeah, super early in the week. I forget.
ESPN the Ocho. No, I'm kidding. That's
yeah,
horrible.
basically.
That's
So who is he playing against? Is he playing against? I know we're talking about D1 athletes still. They're good, but they're not, Quentin Nelson. They're not whoever all these other guards are. And Zach Martin, whoever else it may be. They're not those guys. So it'll be interesting to see if he can compete in that level. So for me, I usually lean lower on the totem pole for that. I will probably maybe take some last round shots at him if he falls that far in rookie drafts, and maybe it works out because obviously he can put up stats. So if it works out, it's great.
Well, I think it's going to depend on what kind of draft you have too, right?
Definitely. If it's,
if you're like 3-4 round rookie draft, you're probably not taking him at all. But if you're 7 to 10 rounds, he's worth a flyer.
Yeah, and it all comes down to playing time at the end of the day too. So where he ends up and how much he's playing, we'll have to see. But I'm not too high on him at this point.
See, one of the things I like to do here is I always like to draw some comparisons between offensive players and defensive players, just so people who are kind of like new to IDP kind of get an idea of, where our thought process is when it comes to like, okay, player value. What is the player value? What's the comparable value here? And so let's take Karl Brooks, Bowling Green. And I'm going to compare him to A.T. Perry, wide receiver from Wake Forest. Yes, it's the ACC versus the MAC. I understand that the level of competition is better at the ACC than the MAC. But still, A.T. Perry, somebody who has a lot of impressive stats that for me, somebody who puts up the impressive stats, now granted he's an ACC wide receiver, but he's not taking on SEC talent. Here you got Karl Brooks, a MAC player who puts up impressive stats, but he's not taking on, coincidentally, ACC or SEC talent, So I don't know. When I see just the level of domination, like Hollywood, you brought it up. It was a very good point. Like, didn't play the upper echelon of players, but what he did do, what he was supposed to do, was dominate his competition wherever he was at, and he did. He completely
Well, see,
dominated.
that's the thing. You nailed it. A lot of times when people, well, he played against lesser competition. Yes, he did. But he dominated that lesser competition.
He did.
I mean, just dominated. And for me, that's a little check mark for you. It would be one thing if he was in the max and he only put up average numbers or he couldn't put up big numbers. Then I would really be concerned. But the fact that he was in that league and he done what he was supposed to, dominated, I'm going to be like, okay, I'll give you a benefit of the doubt. I'll give you a check here, which moves him up.
Right. So exactly. So where I was going with the comparison between the offensive and defensive player was that I'm willing to take a gamble and maybe throw in maybe a third round pick on players that have like real dominant upside. So somebody like here for Carl Brooks. I am super excited about what he has to bring to the table. Much like I'm excited about Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin, 6'4", 315 pounds. Against the Power 5, number 1 in quarterback hits. Love that. Love it when you have a pass rusher who can play the run and play the pass well. Quarterback hits, 8th in total pressures, 12th in defensive win rate versus offensive linemen. His 2022 stats, 20 solo, 16 assists. We're noticing a trend here, with the interior defensive linemen. A lot of them are eating blocks. He's just collapsing on players, for lack of a better term. Chasing down the run, gang tackling players. There you go. That's a better way of putting it. Gang tackling. So you're not really seeing that true separation between solo and assist. But again, the TFLs, 4.5 sacks, 10 TFLs last season. Just a massive mammoth of a human being who can absorb blocks. He has great technique when it comes to getting to the quarterback. They referenced how he has basically like and this is like sacrilege, and I apologize for doing this, but he has the clubbing arms of a Reggie White where he's just like, roll out of my way. But he does that as an interior lineman. I'm not saying he's Reggie White. I'm not saying he's the minister of defense. I'm just saying the technique. I'm just saying it's impressive to see an interior defensive lineman swat away people like they're nothing and apply pressure to the quarterback. He can chase down the run. He gets you those assisted tackles, which is impressive. He gets you the quarterback pressures, which is impressive. He gets you the quarterback hits. All these translate into fantasy points for you, depending on your scoring system. Coincidentally, when we have here Fantasy Frames, reward such things. So definitely somebody who I'm super excited about. NFL comps, they have NFL.com. They have him comped to somebody who could be your starter, needs to, tell me if you heard this one before, needs to land in the right situation. Who doesn't need to land in the right situation? I hate it when I see that and they have to put that information on there. But he is just a mammoth human being. Like I said, played at Wisconsin, great stats, great interior presence. The motor is there. He just wants to get after the quarterback. He has the moves. He can dance the dance. He can run people down. He can take them down. He doesn't have great placement in terms of his legs. They were saying the scouting reports that I've read. So when it comes to absorbing double teams, that's kind of like a weak spot for him. But again, you put him in a situation where you have at least one competent pass rusher on one end of the defensive line, he's going to get those one-on-one opportunities. And I think any one-on-one opportunity he's going to get, that's going to translate into some pressures, which could potentially get you the hits and hopefully gets you the sack upside. But the quarterback hits is important for me. The win rate versus offensive lineman is important for me. And the fact that he has great technique as interior defensive lineman, something that, a lot of edge rusher prospects don't have, just screams value. Again, somebody for me that I'm looking probably, again, third round, we're talking about defensive tackles, late third, early fourth. Obviously, you're going to be filling up your rookie drafts with linebackers, safeties, premier edge rushers. But again, in those leagues that have 5 position designations, those defensive tackle specific leagues, he is somebody you need to put that notification feature on your phone or your app that says track player. Because if that player survives the draft, you go get him off your waiver wire and you stash him on a taxi squad on your roster for your dynasty league, and you just sit there and wait. Because I think with given the right opportunity, he could definitely pay dividends for you for your IDP fantasy leagues and dynasty. And with that, let's get to our final prospect of today's show. Austin, who do you got for us?
Well, you guys already said Reggie White. You already said Aaron Donald. So how about Mean Joe Green? I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna make any comparisons like that. Let's go with Brian Breezy, I believe is how you say it. He's a junior out of Clemson. He measures 6'5", 305 pounds. The biggest thing coming into the 2022 season was how is he going to hold up after the ACL injury in 2021? And this past season, there was a lot of scouts that said he looked stiff throughout the year, which isn't great coming off an ACL. But the NFL Combine came around and he showed out. He put those reports to bed and just showed how explosive and twitchy he can be. And that's not a common thing people get back. For example, we saw J.K. Dobbins come back and he looked like he was running with a broken leg on that long touchdown run. I'm sure most people remember seeing on Twitter everywhere.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
Yeah. Breezy clocked in with a lightning speed of 4.86 in the 40, which was fourth in the defensive tackles. He had a 1.71 in the 10-yard split, which was second among the D tackles. And this just showed how quick and fast he can. And he was able to put these numbers up in Clemson, where he had 21 total pressures, 4 quarterback hits, and 3.5 sacks in 2022. The run support was something that he didn't get the stats for. He only got 15 total tackles through 10 games, but 5.5 of those were behind the line. He was luckily able to hold his ground in double team situations. Although his tackle numbers weren't something to speak for, he showed great play rec and showed great pursuit after the ball. So I feel like those stats, those tackles, and everything will come because he's in the right spot at the right time, usually. So honestly, it's hard to say his fantasy production if those stats don't come, the tackles don't come, but he's able to get behind the line. He shows that he's quick. He shows that he's fast. He can get off the line quickly, beat those offensive linemen. But can he actually finish the play at the next level? That'll be something we see. And like Hollywood's been saying all night, it will depend on, the difference in the league type. Do you have D tackles or do you have just defensive ends, edge rushers?
Well, couple things right here. First of all, he's probably the second best defensive tackle in this league or in this class.
Right.
If you followed me on WIDP Grind, then you know I love Breezy, right? But you were talking about his numbers and two things you mentioned the ACL tear in 2021 that he was coming back from last year.
Mm-hmm.
But also don't forget, he was dealing with a lot personally too, as his sister passed away, as she died. So he was dealing with that. He's a high impact player, right? That's what he was in college. I mean, you're seeing him get in the backfield, make TFLs and sacks and safeties and all this stuff. I think when he's right and he's not got, family things on his mind, rightfully so, and he's not dealing with an injury, when he's healthy and he's right, he's a monster. He can be a monster.
I mean, it's almost like the NFL draft is a blessing for him in that regard. I mean, you get a fresh start somewhere potentially.
Right.
From a life standpoint, you take into account what he can be, what his ceiling has been over the course of his collegiate career. I do find it interesting that a lot of the players that we've talked about in tonight's show, we've emphasized the role in stopping the run, whether it's defensive stops or tackles for a loss. And this is like the first one we talked about tonight where we're actually talking about tackle volume and how that could potentially raise his ceiling. But then, Austin, you brought up the concern whether or not that tackle volume is something that can be replicated at the next level. So, is his pressure rate, is his ability to apply pressure something that, we're okay with as a baseline for somebody like him? And in speaking to all these players we've been talking about tonight, like TFLs is kind of like a stat we've been talking about. We've been hammering home here for the interior defensive lineman. Do you consider TFLs, Hollywood, a sticky stat when we're trying to find value for IDP? We look at linebackers and we're like, well, obviously the tackles, the tackle volume is what we're looking at. That's sticky. We're talking about pass breakups for cornerbacks. Well, it depends on how much they're targeted, but if they're targeted often, that could potentially be sticky. Not always, but potentially. For defensive tackles, what are your thoughts here? Like, is it really the TFLs that we're really concerned about, or are we worried about, is that the only sticky stat we can go off of for defensive tackles?
I don't think it's the only one. On IDP Nation, when Dan was with me, me and him kind of stumbled on this together. And for defensive players, I mean, it does kind of differentiate, the position. But like we called it indicator stats, right? So PBUs for cornerbacks and safeties was a good indicator stat for interceptions, right? If you're getting a ton of PBUs, then that means doesn't mean you're going to get the interceptions, but it's a good indicator that you're in position to get those interceptions, right? It was the same with quarterback pressures. If you had a lot of quarterback pressures, you're putting yourself in position to get those sacks. So I think TFLs are very similar, right? You're putting yourself in position to make a lot of tackles. So, and those are impact plays. But yeah, I think they're like we used to call them. We called them indicator plays. So yeah.
Nice. No, totally get that. Totally agree with all that. And with that, that's going to do it for our talk about interior defensive linemen here, upcoming for the NFL draft and how these names could potentially help you in your fantasy football leagues in Dynasty going forward. Don't forget to head over to our YouTube page again if you're not already there. Like and subscribe to all of our content we have there, as well as head over to fantasyandframes.com. If there are any interior defensive lineman players or edge rushers that we have not talked about that you want to hear more about, you want us to do some research for you and get you some information, let us know. Drop it in the comments section here. Reach out to us on Twitter. Reach out to Fantasy and Frames at Fantasy and Frames. We'll be happy to do a pro player profile breakdown of them video form, as well as an article form. So just let us know. And next week we're going to have a very special guest, Mace Rainey, one of the top IDP rankers in Fantasy Pros' ECR competition last year, will be with us to talk about the top IDP rookie linebacker prospects heading into the 2023 NFL draft. Hollywood, it's great to have you on functioning internet versus last week. This is fantastic. This is a brand new thing. This is new to me, so I love it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I know you just love me.
What you're talking about.
See, I was going to say kind of the opposite. It was almost nice to have a break from hearing him sometimes.
Last week, you mean?
Yeah, last week. Now we had to hear him the entire time, and now there's no guessing of what he's saying. So now we just know all the information.
There's going to be no guessing what I'm saying later.
You see, this is your protege. This is who you decided to take under your wing, and
then he better get ready for tough love because it's coming.
And of course, we will be doing that off air. For those of you who have not been paying attention to our social media channels, you should, because for every single podcast we have going on here at Fantasy and Frames, we're doing a little after show recording special where we're basically telling you and showing you what we're really like behind the scenes and what it's really like to be behind a podcast production, as well as just getting to know us better. So we'll be dropping videos like this for Shoot the Gap and Fourth and Frames and the Daily Fix when we get the in-season DFS, and of course with a Dynasty 365. So really, really, really looking forward to seeing you all and getting your reactions to them. We've had a few videos that have not made the publishable cut, but we can definitely say that they are hilarious. So definitely tune in for that. You can see that also on our YouTube channel, as well as check out all of our content at fantasyandframes.com. So for Hollywood, for Austin, I'm Jorge. Again, Mace Rainey next week talking rookie linebacker prospects. Y'all have a great weekend and enjoy yourselves.
Later.